Hello and welcome to BioBiz Buzz. I'm your host, Shani Alexander, and I'm a journalist with BioWorld, one of the leading publications for news and analysis on therapeutics and medical devices. In this episode, I will be talking about the evolving nature of medical devices. With the advancement and development of new technologies, we are seeing the increasing use of data and AI being incorporated into solutions for healthcare. Where is this heading and what does it mean for investment? My guest today is Werner Lanthaler. He is founder and CEO of WLan Holding, a family office which invests in and offers advice to life science and sustainability companies. Werner, can you please just tell us a little bit more about your background before we dive into how you got into founding the family office WLan Holding?
Good morning and great to be on your show. So my name is Werner. I recently, basically 2.5 years ago, started WLan Holding with the idea to translate MedTech, biotech, and sustainability ideas from academic inception to scale-up companies. When we had this idea and started this initiative, it was very clear to us that a convergence of technologies is coming, and we wanted to be part of this. And I feel that it's, for me, also a wonderful journey to do, because before that, I was operating in biotech and pharma companies, and I was also overseeing several biotech and pharma companies. And now I feel that helping entrepreneurs and investing into companies is just a wonderful addition to my journey so far.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the companies that you currently invest in?
So when I come from your focus angle, MedTech, we very often look at what are future technologies that will change the way we look at things. So for example, if you have omics-based analysis today available on lower cost and broader mass, then it is very obvious that it's just a question of time when will we see the first medtech-driven application on a wide range of omics-driven technologies. And that's why, for example, investing into a company that is called Attention.life, which is a multi-omics, omics-based diagnostic company for novel detection of hypertension, is an application of an academic setting into a medtech company surrounding. And that's always the theme that we try to apply when we are entering our companies. I give another example from a completely different world. We also, as WLan Holding, have invested into an animal health company, which is going for biobetters and biosimilars in the animal health space, where you effectively see this trend of lower cost biologics that can cure, not only applied in humans, but also applied in animals. So that's a bit where we try to see a mega trend that already shows success in one or the other area, and then try to apply this mega trend where we really take the core of a technology into another field. Today, we have about 12 investments in our portfolio, and I don't want to make here a promotion activity out of that, but I'm sure we'll come to some of the examples in the later stage of this discussion.
But maybe we can dive into that now and focus more on the medtech and where does it fit in and how we're seeing this convergent sector of data being applied to technology. So maybe you could make examples of that.
So, for example, the rise of devices and the rise of wearables and the rise of things that we carry on our body that are fed with data and that basically carry data, and the use of AI algorithms in convergence with this will transform multiple sectors. I give you one example. It's a company called murmurs, which is stethoscopes used with AI to detect basically where does my heart beat. So as different sounds than we would have normally detected this with a traditional stethoscope. And if you then can overlay this with a long AI-driven database, then you see that bringing technologies together in a MedTech setting all of a sudden makes a linear application into a non-linear, much higher value application. Or take what you have seen coming up with many of the watches, with many of the Whoops and the Auras and so on. I think it's just the beginning of not only monitoring your sleep behavior, your daily behavior, it's ultimately a preventive tool for your healthcare setting. And that's why I think with these MedTech devices, we are opening the door for first better diagnostics, which will be then very often omics driven. Secondly, we are opening the door to come to a medicine which is no longer just digitally telling us you are sick or you're not sick, but we are coming to a world where these devices together with AI will basically tell us where along the journey of a disease are you and what are then the potential interventions. Because only if we make these devices intelligent in telling us something and changing behavior, then we will understand why we pay a lot of money from them. And sorry to be so long, but last sentence on this, where will this all ultimately go in a very clear, very short-term application? It's that we all have to realize that we will age faster and better than ever before. And I say better because healthy, productive aging and how we can support healthy, productive aging with, let's call it devices and intelligent devices, I think is one of the biggest themes for the next decades to come and one of the biggest application areas for the technologies that we have developed.
Okay, but I understand that data, lab data, molecular data, all the data will certainly help with diagnostics. But what about the hardcore medtech, like the basic things like valves and stents? You don't need AI or data to develop these. I mean, where will they fit into the picture for the future?
These will be all intelligent devices because whenever, of course, there will be many applications where you say, okay, we just need a replacement of a hip, let's make a new hip. Or when you have a stent, it will be a stent. But now just imagine that an implanted hip is also delivering data to you. And the combination of here, a hard piece of metal with a little chip that then also is giving you data is not far away. And when you think about these movies in the past where we had cyborgs, which was the combination of biology and humans, where you had a hard piece of metal and then this was basically a Terminator or whatsoever. And this was a bit joking in the past or science fiction in the past. But I think that's where MedTech, together with the learning and the data generation out of these tools, will become significantly more intelligent. And that's where also this sector will go. And it will become so affordable. And I think that's the term to use here, that we will ask ourselves the question, why not generating data when we have, for example, a new knee or a new hip or any other thing in our body?
Whereas are companies ready for this convergence? Because, I mean, companies that's developing a hip, they're not necessarily thinking about the data that will come with it. I mean, where are they and how are they seeing this new convergence?
So this new convergence is, I think, just think about companies like Apple, like Google, like Nvidia today, which you would never classify as pharmaceutical companies, as biotech companies, or as medtech companies. Nevertheless, think about what's happening. An Apple Watch is a device that is also telling you the time, but 80% of the functions ultimately are leading into healthcare applications. If you think about what Google can do, if you allow them to watch your muscles and your muscle behavior, and what they can ultimately then also have as data fed into next generation developments, it's going to be super important and super precise medicine. And that's, I think, where this convergence will happen. It will come from companies who have the technical know-how to do this, because it is awfully hard and it takes an enormous know-how, and it takes hundreds of years to develop the know-how to make a MedTech device that is precise, that is reliable. And then you have these other companies coming with the clear vision to march into the healthcare sector. And I think that's where many of these companies will meet. If you look at the big gorillas out there like Thermo Fisher or at Waters, or I don't want to name too many companies here, but you really see how this convergence is happening from both angles. Here you have a device, here you have data. How do we bring this together? And it's very clear that today, many of these things are still in silos and not coming together. And probably the most pronounced silo that we have always seen in the last decades was that diagnostics was a separate silo from therapeutic development and also from tools development. And that's why this convergence is happening once people understand that silos don't make sense for the next generation of medicine that we should develop.
And companies are understanding it. They're realizing that they need to be there. And what about the safety of this data as well? I mean, I'm walking around in 10 years' time. Another company will know everything that's going on with my health, especially there are things like brain-computer interface that's been developed as well. They will know what I'm thinking. I mean, yes, we will get better treatment, but should we be concerned?
So what is very European is that we are always afraid of data safety before we think about what data can do for us to make a longer, healthier, and more productive life. Yeah. And I don't want to belittle this discussion at all. I just think that going to the benefits of what technology can do to us and understanding the benefits is definitely the first step to do before we worry to death and don't do anything, because it will happen. And always think about your relatives, your family, and yourself. If whatever CNS disease will ever hit you and you have the chance to help yourself or someone else, then all of a sudden data security is a second-class question. And again, I don't want to belittle it, but it's just something where this question should not hold us back from doing it. That's one thing. And the other aspect is this is at the end a competitive world where many companies are thriving for commercial success. And that's why we see competition from China, we see competition from the US, we see competition out of Europe. We have to go here at the same space and not just say before we Europeans haven't figured out what safety means in the use of data, let the others do it first. It doesn't work. And if you look at the latest publications on data collection, data use, data aggregation out of China, then we would have not expected that China is so fast and so radically going ahead here. And that's why I'm very pronounced that I just don't want to lose because of that.
Okay. What about investors then? How are they viewing these companies and how is that impacting their investment strategies?
Yeah, so that's also a super question. Thank you for that, because one key learning that we have here as a company is that investing these days is harder than ever before, because companies are very often still made in a linear fashion and not coming together in the convergence that as a philosophy and as a strategic angle I've just described to you. So what you will always get, you get the business plan of the next device from a device spin-off group of a technical university, and you get the therapeutic application from a biology group from a medical school. And that's why I think it increasingly becomes the role of intelligent capital to bring these things together before they are even investable. And that's where I think learning to say very often no on these linear investment theses is very important, because that's very often a good idea, but not a unicorn-like business model. And that's when you're investing into these risk profiles, you have to try to aim for that these are high return, high risk business models, but most of the linear business models ultimately will have a hard time to go there, because what is not coming down so far is the cost of coming to the market and generating superior high margin revenues. And that's, I think, where medtech, biotech, diagnostics are still all the same, that we see more technology, but what we do not see this technology allowing us to make high value interventions faster at lower cost. So for example, one of the biggest promises of AI in drug discovery was that clinical trials will be virtual and time will be a fourth of before and cost will be half of before. And that's all good and true in theory. If you look at the 400 clinical applications that were in the mix in the last 12 months, then these were still 40 million to entry into the clinic, 5 years to entry into the clinic, and only a very, very little increase in speed and in probabilities of success. So these technologies are there, but the full application is still missing. That's, I think, what I'm saying.
What I'm trying to get at is, based on what you said, diagnostics, for example, you're not going to make a unicorn from a diagnostic company. So if you have an idea for an early diagnosis of a, I don't know, chronic kidney disease or one of these diseases, how do you then get an investor like yourself to say yes, because you're thinking about the unicorn and you're thinking about the technology and you're thinking about how this will scale?
So I think here it really comes down to platforms on multiple use. So let's take again omics-based diagnostics. It's a separate distribution channel. It's a separate key account management. It's a separate lab chain management that you have to have in your vision here. Making only one mass-spec diagnostic and having one mass-spec infrastructure to be built will only on a very low probability be a unicorn-like business model. But if you can envision mass spectrometry as a precise readout applied for CNS diagnostics, for heart diagnostics, for kidney diagnostics, and for multiple, then these infrastructures will be, I think, very, very attractive and also cases that are investable. And that's I think, where I'm always coming from, that many of these new technologies are platforms that are looking for applications, and one application very often is not enough. So that's why these platforms, once you can apply them to multiple things, they will become very powerful. And that's, I think, where it becomes investable. And omics-based diagnostics is here, I think, a very clear example. AI algorithms can be used in many ways and should be used in many ways. And that's also why here the combination of diagnostics and AI ultimately will help us a lot.
Let's change tack a little bit. We're now halfway through the year. What are your thoughts on the MedTech sector for the first half? At the beginning, the IPO market opened up in the US, at least. We saw a couple of deals in Europe, but there was an excitement that this year the tide will turn on MedTech and there will be more financing. We saw more deals done. But now it seems that excitement has waned a little bit. Why do you think that is, and how do you see the rest of the year unfolding?
So maybe let's not go there that macroeconomics are volatile and are really more unpredictable than they probably have been in the years before. Because I'm a fundamental believer that it is technology insight and technology breakthroughs that ultimately also open financings and capital markets. And when you look at the last years, you saw many of these technologies in their infancy, and it was not very clear where these things will go. And then you look at, let's take another company, for example, NVIDIA. Many people ultimately did not know. So what should we do with all these fast speed chips? And all of a sudden, we see, God, there is more data out there, and we need these chips, and they can really help us. And then, you see that a technology which first was not really fully understood becomes investable. Or a sector that, for example, at WLan Holding, we also follow is mass data storage, where data storage and cost for data storage is a very difficult to grasp thing. But once you understand that dynamic, and if you can save costs there, then you also understand why this is not only good for your return on capital if you need less money, but it's also very good for the environment because data storage and energy is a direct link. So I think we are now slowly seeing why these technologies have a huge impact. And once the investors world sees where this impact lies, then also these sectors become investable again. And that's why I think we are at the beginning of a next level insight into where the benefit of devices comes from and where the logic of these devices goes to. And many people will see why, for example, wearables, or you have seen the Brain Lab IPO attempt, at least, where all these things are going, that there is a business case, especially if the dynamic of this aging population comes in and is a market for these companies. And that's why I think we will see very good business cases coming. We will see a macro environment for biotech, medtech, and diagnostics that will become increasingly investable. I think it will continue to stay a bit harder for hardcore therapeutic development in biotech because that's still an unpredictable game when it comes to pricing and risk benefit. But for clearer business cases and earlier stage applications, I'm very optimistic for the remainder of 25. And I'm especially optimistic for 26 and beyond because with reduced interest rates on a macro environment and other sectors having already performed quite well, people will also shine their light into the biotech and medtech sector sooner or later, which ultimately have been in, let's call it, financing winters for multiple years now. And, you know, I do this for 30 years to be in this world, and it's a long winter, but that's why maybe the spring and the summer next time will be also longer because there's a lot to catch up.
And that's down to the evolution of technology that's leading a lot to
the impact,
yeah,
the impact that we will have. And again, think about, you know, that every 10 years we are aging on average by 1.6 years more. And now think about your eyeglasses, think about your monitoring of your health when it comes to CNS diseases, to kidney diseases, to other diseases. So simply that trend will make many of these technologies essential to make a healthier and better life for a population which is not only in the blue zones above 100, but where London will be a blue zone. Think about it.
Yeah, that would be nice to see. Just a couple more questions. So you mentioned biotech because you invest in both biotech and medtech. I mean, how do you see the overall investment market for medtech compared to biotech?
So I think on biotech, we have a technology wealth at this stage, which is leading to cure in certain aspects. So let's think about the next wave of cell therapies, which in many therapeutic applications will lead to cure. And that's something completely different than just a little prolongation of life or a more healthy life. And that's where, when we can prove and show that in many of the disease areas, our interventions will lead to cure, there will be a next wave of biotech coming. And here I'm very optimistic, for example, in next generation oncology interventions, next generation of I&I interventions, where again, the hurdle is very high now because it's cure. But once you achieve that, then you also understand why pricing will be high, because the economic benefit and societal benefit will be high. That's one aspect. And the other aspect is the democratization of medicine through biotech technologies will also be a huge trend. And that's where you will see biosimilars, you will see generics, you will see simply out of the 5 billion people that currently don't have access to a lot of medicine, many of them getting access to medicine, which also is technology-led. very often. So I think that's where this sector, at least for the next decade, has a lot to do, has a lot to catch up, and will also find a lot of investor interest. And MedTech for me is so much clearer in a way, because again, the intelligence and convergence that we will see on many of the devices coming will have a huge impact. And that's why we know the companies that are coming, and I don't want to name all of them, but some of them are simply very elegant. And you will also see that these will be the companies, but will be the acquisition targets of the Apples, the Googles, and the Thermo Fishers, because that's ultimately their shortcut to become from search or tech companies, healthcare and life science companies. And that's why if this trend comes on top of technological evolution that we see M&A kicking into the medtech sector, which also will definitely come back into the biotech sector, then there is no reason to believe that also early stage funding, which is disastrous these days, will come back. And again, several things have to come together, but there's no reason to believe that this will not come together in the near future.
Excellent. And just finally, what should medtech companies then take away from this? You come from a family office, which tend to have a different investment criteria to the larger VC firms. So what advice would you give to a startup company currently struggling to raise funds?
So we have recently invested into a company that is epitope matching, for example, for kidney transplants. And they had a business plan which really did not show a lot of scale up for more than 10 years. And I think that's just very hard to see for investors to wait for 10 years for these business plans to mature and then to also see the first time that things are going the right direction. So my first advice would always be, think about your technology, think about a small scale pilot where you can show in a subpopulation or in a well-stratified group that you can scale up the product and revenues relatively fast, because then there's enough imagination in investors and also in companies to say, okay, let's go from the pilot bigger and then invest harder. But developing a full platform and then taking 5 to 10 years before you ever show a dime in revenues, that's just hard. The second thing is really go and look at this convergence of technologies and where your technology applies in population segments where simply there is money. And that's why I'm always putting these aging populations out there, because there is a new financial pattern evolving that people will not only save for their kids and grandkids, they will save for the spending of a healthier and more productive life for themselves. So that's why an application where you are not only hoping for a reimbursement of a public insurance system, but where you have a private consumer that is there to spend money, I think is also good advice. And the third would really always be, don't found your companies alone and isolated in silos. Found your companies in teams and go together also in discussing the convergence of these things earlier than later, because that then makes them truly unique companies that are then fulfilling criteria of unicorns.
Excellent. And we have 1 minute left to end it. So I will say thank you very much, Werner. That concludes our time for today. Thank you again for sharing your thoughts on the evolving nature of medical technologies and how data fits into all that. I also want to thank our listeners for joining us as we looked at how the world of medtech is evolving thanks to the advancement in data and technologies. We hope that this episode has offered valuable insights into what medtech will look like in the future and also what investors, particularly family offices, are looking for. If you have any questions or topics you'd like to discuss in the future, please send to us as BioBiz Buzz. To stay up to date in future editions, follow us on our LinkedIn page. Werner, that was great.
Thank you, Shani.